Namaskar, this is Akhilesh Bhargava. Welcome to Tit-Bits on Business and Finance with me. The Modi government has been trying to sell, disinvest and privatize public sector undertakings since the past few years, but with little success. There have hardly been genuine buyers for a public sector undertaking, whether it be a loss-making one or even if it be a profitable one. And then to top it, there has been fierce opposition to a PSU sale, not just by the aggressive trade unions of these entities, but also by an entire spectrum of political parties, which perhaps explains why public sector undertakings have not really got privatized the way the government wanted. The unrealistic valuations of PSUs and the unacceptable terms of sale also made the privatization of government-owned entities a complete non-starter. For example, who would buy a loss-making Air India for an expected valuation of 50,000 crores, together with its entire debt and with the compulsion to retain its entire bloated manpower for a minimum of 3 years, as the government then pitched in 2017 to the investors? To make it worse, even on these onerous terms of sale, the government then was willing to sell only 74% of its stake in Air India, thus retaining enough ownership power and control to meddle in its affairs while the buyers struggle to revive it and make it worth the expected investment. The government was clearly under a delusion, according to us, while fixing such terms of sale, or perhaps it did not have the political guts to get realistic and fix terms of sale befitting a loss-making entity like Air India. Expectedly, there were no buyers for Air India in 2017, and it continued to bleed losses and waste taxpayer money at a shocking loss, at a shocking cash outflow of 20 crores a day. In the meanwhile, to shore up its finances, a cash-strapped government continued to indulge in a farce of privatization and disinvestment, with reluctant PSUs being asked to buy another. ONGC was compelled to buy the government's stake in HPCL for 36,915 crores. Similarly, Power Finance Corporation was forced to buy REC for rupees 14,500 crores, and the Dredging Corporation of India was bought by 4 government-owned ports for 1,050 crores. That was neither privatization nor disinvestment, but it was a mere financial jugglery with money going from one pocket of the government to another. Each year, the union budget provided for receipt of over 1 lakh crores from sale of government enterprises, but it could sell none, except for these farcical sales of one PSU buying another and damaging its own balance sheet in the process. That happened, for example, in the case of ONGC, when in the process of buying HPCL, its entire treasury got emptied and the expansion plans of ONGC were badly hit. It was clear that the government then lacked the political will or maybe even the professional expertise to sell a PSU. After all, the last privatization of a government-owned entity had taken place in the Atal Bihari Vajpayee government's tenure, and there were no precedents thereafter for the Babus to follow, emulate, and adopt. For some Babus, there was also the fear of a backlash by way of a CBI investigation and prosecution, as had happened when coal mines were allocated during the Manmohan Singh era. It made the entire sale perhaps a no-no even for the Babu lot. The budgetary provision of disinvestment receipts each year thus remained an intent on paper, with little traction during the first Modi government tenure. Things, however, changed after Mr. Modi came back to power in 2019 again with a much bigger majority and a much bigger political capital to put their decisions through. The privatization disinvestment agenda of the government was firmly back on the table, and so was Air India back on the block after the failed attempt of its sale in 2017. By then, the airline's losses had shot up even more, and before its value depleted further, a new owner, a new management had to be put in place. The government made its intent to sell PSUs clear when in its round of reforms last year, the finance minister said that all sectors will be thrown open to the private sector and even in strategic sectors, the government enterprises will not meet more than 4. That was a very clear agenda set by the government last year. The finance minister then reiterated it again in the 2021 budget proposals when she said that as part of the government's Atmanirbhar package, it has approved a policy of disinvestment in all strategic as well as non-strategic sectors. She said that the government has been working towards strategic disinvestment of a number of public sector undertakings, which included BPCL, Air India, Shipping Corporation of India, IDBI Bank, Bharat Earth Movers Limited, Pawan Hans, and various others. She also said that the government will seek to bring an IPO of LIC in the current financial year, which is before 31st March 2022. The finance minister then said that the government expects disinvestment receipts of 1,75,000 crores during this financial year. With all these announcements, the Committee of Secretaries on Disinvestment continued its parallel efforts to sell Air India, which was the most complicated case on the block. After all, Air India is a company with huge losses which have accumulated to over 70,000 crores. It has a massive debt of over rupees 61,000 crores. It has surplus manpower and that too with an aggressive trade union. It has too many subsidiaries and too many non-core assets which include a lot of art, etc., which an airline buyer would be certainly unwilling to pay for. After all, he would put in money only to the extent that was needed to buy an airline and not its non-core surplus assets. Moreover, it operates in an industry which has been out of favor with investors. And the most important, Air India has had a history of failed attempts to privatize and sell in the past, which made it almost a no-no. Thus, after getting the political mandate and muscle to sell Air India lock, stock and barrel, the challenge was to carve out unwanted assets and liabilities from its balance sheets and fix a realistic reserve price and then get a buyer. The reserve price for Air India had to be one which met market expectations for takeover of a loss-making entity. The overriding issue was that, apart from the cash flow pressures on the government because of its daily losses, if the government was to signal to the world that it was serious about disinvestment and privatization this time, then it was imperative to begin with Air India, the most difficult case on the table. A successful sale of Air India would also later draw investors into the sale of bigger items in the government's kitty, such as the LIC IPO, sale of BPCL, etc. It would also set precedent for the bureaucracy to follow for the privatization of many other public sector undertakings being planned and sold by the government. It is said that so tough it was to attract bids for Air India that despite keeping a realistic reserve price of 12,906 crores and substantially pruning debt to be taken over by the bidder, there were no initial bidders for Air India. The grapevine says that the Tatas had to be cajoled, coaxed and convinced by the government that Air India is a worthy buy and that they must bid for it. Thus, in reality, there was just one bidder for Air India, which is the House of Tatas, and the other one, which is the SpiceJet Consortium, was just there for optics. The Tatas finally took Air India for 18,000 crores, convinced that its airplanes, trained pilots and crew, lucrative landing rights, flying routes, parking slots at worldwide airports, bilateral flying rights and routes across Europe, North America and West Asia as India's national carrier were worth the money, despite all the challenges that they will face when they take over Air India. And the first challenge it faces is this massive surplus manpower of Air India that it needs to retain for a minimum of 1 year. With the deal done and the government having hurriedly issued a letter of intent to the Tatas and Ratan Tata saying, "Welcome back," it is apparent that the successful sale of Air India is a historic milestone for the government, which will pave the way for its huge disinvestment and privatization program. This sale of Air India has set a precedent and experience for the government and the investors to emulate for various reasons. It has a number of benefits and reasons why now it will open the entire disinvestment and privatization agenda of the government. What are those reasons? The first one, the Air India sale is a watershed moment according to us that has broken the jinx of privatization by the government. The fact is that it was a complex sale due to its multiple assets, due to its many subsidiaries, due to a huge debt pile, due to powerful unions, massive losses and potential hidden liabilities. And that all the more signals the government's firm commitment to sell PSUs. If Air India has been privatized, then sale of others will be much easier now, and we should see some high-profile PSU privatizations taking place in the coming months and quarters. The second, it will boost the confidence of both the government and the bidders, and for other PSUs, there will be many more buyers with chances of a better value and price realization for the government. Bidders will now have the faith that a public sector undertaking can be sold and done from start to finish within a defined timeline, which was not there earlier. See how Air India lingered for years together. The third, privatization was a new subject for the present bunch of bureaucrats with no experience. The last transaction had happened 19 years ago. The fear of investigation agencies by way of post-deal hounding was also there in the air. They were reported to be a hesitant lot at the start, but we now see that they will not be hesitant anymore as things go on. This Air India sale has set a strong precedent with a great deal of learning for the Babus, including learning and respect of how to handle legal issues, financial issues, balance sheet and listing issues, apart from various valuation methodologies which are considered when a PSU is sold. The decision making for the next round of PSU sales will be speeded up with lesser delays in finalizing the template of the information memorandum, of the request for participation document, of the terms of VRS for the excess staff, and also of the share purchase agreement. The next is that a fear of unknown and contingent liabilities often discourages investors and hurts value realization for the government. The government permitted an independent review of all contracts, litigation, human resource issues of Air India, which actually helped to crystallize the deal. And this might be the norm going forward. And finally, the government, it is said, is likely to empower DIPAM itself, the department entrusted with this responsibility, to take all commercial decisions regarding a PSU sale, which will of course speed up decision making for the next PSUs being sold. The fact of the matter is that if PSU sales continue to take place in this manner, then the government will be also able to implement its policy of keeping a minimum presence in strategic areas. It will get the fiscal space, it will get the governance bandwidth to focus on more critical areas than managing loss-making PSUs. The sale of Air India is certainly a good job done according to us, and it sends an excellent and powerful signal regarding the government's broader disinvestment program. The next challenge for it, according to us, is the LIC IPO, which to us will also decide whether the government meets its disinvestment receipts target of rupees 1.75 lakh crores for the current financial year. We think that with this turn of events, with Air India successfully sold, the government is going to be able to continue with its disinvestment and privatization program at a rapid pace. This is Akhilesh Bhargava signing off till we meet again. Namaskar.